Hi. So for those who don't know, I am a software engineer at a startup in Melbourne called Locals, and for the past 18 months I've been, let's say, playing around, investigating, using React Native. It's a bit interesting to talk about React Native here in a Google developer group meetup because React Native is Facebook and you guys obviously seem to like Flutter more. This is a bit awkward. But yeah, I'm gonna talk about React Native. And yeah, I'm gonna talk about React Native. But a bit of a disclaimer first, you are not going to learn how to build an app. I'm going to be giving a brief, like a general overview of what React Native is. If you want to know more about how to build a React Native app, just like React, there is a very simple create React Native app tool that lets you get started. And hopefully, after hearing my talk, you all go and read the React Native documentation and learn how to do it. Maybe. Fingers crossed. So I want to get a show of hands. Who actually has heard of React Native? Before my talk, but yes. Who's actually used React Native? Anyone want to give their experience of like, was it good? Was it bad? Was it indifferent? Yep, anyone?
How long you got?
Huh? I just want to see. For those who actually aren't aware, I'm going to quickly just do this. It's just another framework that lets you write mobile apps using JavaScript, and as its name suggests, it just basically uses React as an underlying technology and leverages what makes React great, such as the components model, the declarative nature of the user interface, and basically just translate what React does great and puts it into a mobile native context. So why the hell should you care about React Native? Well, basically, awareness is growing, especially amongst the JavaScript community. If you see the results on that slide over there, this is from the State of JS survey. And for the last few years, people are very interested about learning React Native. That yellow bar is, they've heard about it, but they want to investigate it. Roughly about 18-20% of the community have used it and would use it again. There probably some more people who've used it would want to use it again. That's their opinion. As well, and that's no surprise. There's no surprise that many people are jumping on board React Native. A lot of big names have jumped on the React Native bandwagon, and not just Facebook and Instagram. You have companies like these. You have Tesla, you have Skype, you have Pinterest, you have Bloomberg, Walmart, Uber, Discord, ZQQ, and Locals. I've got to plug my company somewhere. You've also got Up. Up is using it, and I bet none of you actually knew that. And when I actually told my friends that Up was a React Native app, they're like, the hell? And it's a bit jarring, I understand that. But so why these companies are jumping on board? Basically, they're attracted to this thing. Write once, use everywhere. React Native lets them write the code once in JavaScript, the user interface, and let them use it across multiple platforms such as iOS and Android, on multiple devices, multiple platforms, or even multiple form factors. So what's good about it? So what's actually good about React Native? Well, again, this is all my opinion, bear that in mind. Well, the first thing is the abstraction. Wow, I don't have my notes for that. But basically, React Native is basically React components. But instead of rendering to the DOM, they basically just point to these native components. So, for example, the view component points to UI view in iOS, Android view on Android. Text, same thing. You've also got alerts, switches, the camera, a whole bunch of other SDK stuff. However, I should also point out it's not a perfect abstraction. There are some quirks. Not all the APIs and components provided by React Native are directly supported on both. Some are only affecting one. For example, the push notification API is only available on iOS, but the permissions API is only available on Android. Don't know why, that's their decision. Nevertheless, this power of abstraction is very good. I actually want to go back to this definition I pointed out, mainly because I kind of want to change one thing. It doesn't just do mobile apps. Yes, you can build iOS and Android apps, and that's supported by Facebook, but you can also do Android TV and Apple TV. You can also do, with the help of Microsoft's plugin, you can build Windows apps, Windows 10, Windows Mobile, and Xbox One. You can even do desktop apps with another community plugin. I've even seen someone trying to convert React Native apps into Electron. Seems a bit weird, but I'll let them to it. There's even ways to make React Native work with the web. And yes, it's a bit odd because React is a web technology. Why do you want to go the other way? It may seem odd, but again, this is just because you want to build components and you want to have them. You want to build components that have a consistent experience across many screens, many devices. So having components work for mobile and the web is very important, and I would say very attractive. And just an example, the Times newspaper in the UK actually does this. They actually produce React Native components for their mobile apps, and also extend it towards their web apps as well. And yeah, that's because of the whole write once, use everywhere approach. And hopefully this just shows you how powerful React Native can actually be. You don't need to worry about the components, the actual native components that you want to use, like does this view map correctly or whatever. React Native would do the heavy lifting for you. There's also, I should also point out, there's also a Tizen version. Like you can make Tizen apps, but we don't talk about Tizen. No one talks about Tizen. I want to point to the second one as well. Let's talk about the community. That's also one of the big things about React Native. Frameworks live and die by their community size, and React Native actually has a very large community. If you have an issue somewhere, chances are someone's already figured it out. There's a GitHub issue, someone solved it, or Stack Overflow, thank you so much. And just to show you the size of it, this is from GitHub's October's results from 2018. React Native is the second largest open source project for 2018, only beaten by VS Code. So that's actually pretty good. In addition, in addition with the community, there's a lot of people building their own React Native modules, plugins, components. So if you need something, let's say you need to integrate Google Maps, you can use React Native Maps. If you need to incorporate an image picker, there's a component for that. Analytics from Google, there. AdMob, a Google sign-in button. If you need to incorporate Material UI, there are plenty of them for some reason. But the one we use at Locals, we use something called React Native Paper. And of course as well, because the underlying technology is React, you can actually incorporate some of the React components traditionally from the web into your mobile apps as well. For example, I'm going to put a disclaimer, not all the React React app components will work in React Native. I'm going to say most of the popular ones are. Just an example, we actually got 2 web-only React components, React plugins, working on our React Native apps. So for example, Formic. Formic is a React tool that lets you generate forms on the fly. We managed to get that working in React Native. And React Loads, which is developed by one of developers in our sister company, Medipass. Basically handles load, state management, and we got that working on React Native, even though it was originally designed just for the web. The third bit as well I want to focus on is the flexibility with native, because that's, I think, the strongest part of what React Native is. React Native is very flexible with how you want to integrate with your native code. You can go all in, so you can go like full React Native, and then if you need to take in stuff from native code, that's fine. You can also go the other way. You can also integrate React Native with your existing application. So this is what Facebook does, this is what Instagram does. This basically allows them to produce new functionality quickly and lets them build it in a way that you can roll it out on Android and iOS, as opposed to producing the same screens over and over again for different platforms. Highly advise that you don't go down this path initially, just because it's very complex and the bindings are messy, just to say the least. But in addition as well, like I said, you can go all in with React Native, and if you let's say, produce something that needs something that's high performance, needs multi-threading, just based, for example, image processing or making heavy database calls, you don't have to use JavaScript. You can actually go and fall back on native. And this is what I like. This is a feature called native modules. It's basically lets you use native code. You call your native language or your Android SDK, iOS SDK, and use that within your JavaScript code. So how the hell does that work? So, brief, just general overview. You can divide your React Native up into 3 sections. So you've got your native zone, which is basically your operating system, your SDK layer, and then you've got your JavaScript code, which is the JavaScript core engine. This comes out the box in iOS. So iOS, you don't need to worry about JavaScript core because it's already there. In Android, on the other hand, React Native bundles that because they don't have access to the V8 engine for some reason on Android. Just also want to note as well, if you're building it up locally and doing debug, you might be bitten by the fact that you're going to be using Chrome V8 versus JavaScript core. So you might find yourself having issues on Android, but suddenly, surprise, they suddenly work in your emulator. So just bear that in mind. And then you've got this thing called the bridge. The bridge is basically where all the communication between the native side and the JavaScript sides go to. It's written in your native language, so Swift, Kotlin, Java, Objective-C, but then it basically returns a JavaScript promise or a JavaScript callback. So your JavaScript code will call the bridge method, and that bridge method will then do all the native processing and then send back the result down to the JavaScript side. And this model follows basically for all the React Native components. Not just for your own code, but all the React Native components follow that same method as well. And why? Well, this gives you a bit more flexibility. So if you already are producing your own mobile app and already have like all this native code logic, you don't have to chuck it away when you go to React Native. So you're thinking maybe, I'm just presuming, that this is interesting. So now I'm going to potentially crush that by saying the not so good bits about React Native. Should also point out, this is, again, my opinion. Your mileage may vary. First things first is the JavaScript core engine. So I said previously that Android bundles this into your app. Unfortunately, that version is very old, from 2015. That's not great. Basically, that gives Android a bit of a performance hit because, as we know, JavaScript there's a whole bunch of new JavaScript methods, ES6 and all that stuff, but that would mean that if you want to use any of them, you have to use polyfills, and we all know polyfills can take a whole bunch, performance drain. And yeah, this has been an ongoing issue. Yeah. Also, no 64-bit support. That's also a killer. So you can't build 64-bit apps, and that's largely because React Native itself doesn't provide a 64-bit library. And I'm assuming, as Android developers, you'll know this is a huge problem because of this April 1st deadline, where Google would want you to produce a 64-bit version of your app. And yeah, this issue's been around since 2015, and it's been well documented, it's been well known, but you can see there, I took a screenshot a couple of days ago, that issue's been closed. Because it's coming! It's finally coming! On the next version of 0.59. The upgraded version of JavaScript Core, 64-bit support, it's all coming. Now, this unfortunately also leads to my other point where React Native is slightly still a bit more immature than most. Unlike Flutter, React Native has not hit 1.0. React Native is constantly changing, with features and components being included, deprecated, removed, all that. On one hand, that's a good thing because React Native is getting the latest and greatest, and not only from the Android side, but iOS, but also React. The upcoming version of React 0.59 is bringing React hooks to native. So for those who don't know what React hooks are, it basically lets you use some of the features of React without having to create a new component. There's also work to migrate React Native to use the newer Android X support libraries, improve Gradle support, and for iOS fans, there's going to be improvements in CocoaPods and Xcode. And there's also going to be a massive re-architecture to make it more leaner, more flexible, and hopefully bring a better performance boost. But because of the constant changes, things may break. Things will break, actually, when you're upgrading to one version to another. Most of the time, it's a very small problem. It's probably because we're using, or third-party libraries using, something that's been deprecated or removed, and it may take that like an hour or two. But when upgrade issues hurt, they really do hurt. If you look at that Airbnb quote up there, they had an issue upgrading from 0.43 to 0.49 because of React 16 alpha and beta builds, and that hurt a lot. I recently as well been hurt by some upgrades. For example, React Native changed from Babel 6 to Babel 7, and that just made things slightly more unstable to the point where I had to kick it back for 3 weeks to actually get everything more stable. But don't let this put you off. Upgrading React Native constantly is a good thing. Just while it's getting more stable, I would say just follow this advice in this tweet. Just do it incrementally. Don't go from one major version to from one version to another 15. Do it slow, take your time, and also read the changelog because it's actually pretty important and actually describes what has changed. So should I use it? That's the important question. Hopefully I didn't scare you off with all that. Fingers crossed. But should I use it? Should I use React Native? But it depends. It's a bit of a cop-out answer, I understand that. But like any other framework, you need to decide if it's right for you. Not all companies will like React Native. It won't fit every company's needs. It won't suit every app idea you have. For example, if you want to build, let's say, a Pokemon Go clone or a new banking app, chances are it might suit the banking app more than the Pokemon Go app. But I can tell you why locals adopted React Native. So why did we adopt it? Well, largely because we wanted to build new features first. We wanted to ensure parity between iOS and Android. We had a long-running issue where our Android apps were much more advanced than our iOS apps. And we also wanted to maintain one code base because it was easier. React Native also attracted us because we already had an existing SDK. So we already have an SDK provided to customers. It's already written in Objective-C and Java. So using React Native and the native modules allowed us to just reuse it and without having to spend time rewriting the whole logics, especially the API calls, the JWT refreshes, offline support, all that. Our SDK came with that out of the box. And also, we're a startup. We don't have the same level of resourcing of, let's say, itty-bitty apps or Ozpost or Cognizant. We only have a small pool of mobile developers, and yeah, they also largely maintain our SDKs. So giving them the responsibility, again, like there's like 3 or 4, giving them the responsibility to say, hey, you're also maintaining our apps, yeah, that would probably be bad. On the flip side, we actually have a lot of developers who know JavaScript, so it kind of makes sense from a people perspective that just taking people from our web team, JavaScript team, and giving them React Native to help build our apps. Yeah, and that's how I ended up doing React Native for 18 months. Yeah, so these are the reasons why locals did it. These might apply to your workplace, but these won't apply to every workplace. So I would say do your research. Read Medium articles that may have a positive or negative opinion about React Native. But also, when in doubt, do a POC. We did a POC, and we found it very useful in helping us decide where to go. And that's roughly it. Just briefly as well, Locals is hiring, I forgot to mention that. We are kind of looking for JavaScript developers more than, but if you have JavaScript and Java or JavaScript and Objective-C experience, we'd like to take you as well. If you're interested, approach me after the presentation, or feel free to spread the news to any other of your friends who may be looking for work. And yeah, that's about it.